Hey, good morning from Santa Cruz. Today we are here with Susan True of the Community Foundation of Santa Cruz County. Perhaps you could start out with just briefly telling us what you do at the foundation and maybe a bit about the foundation.
Sure. I've had the good fortune of leading the Community Foundation for the past 5 years as the CEO. And we do a lot of different things at the Community Foundation. We are able to bring people, ideas, and resources together to accomplish philanthropy and, inspire philanthropy and accomplish great things. And we do that in a number of ways by sustained efforts over time on important community issues, but also responding to disasters and being a place where neighbors can come to help neighbors.
That's great. And it seems like you do quite a variety of projects. Already, we've talked about the Watsonville Hospital. I know that there's been a history of the community helping with urgent disasters, natural disasters, and recently floods. Many, many, many different types of projects. And I understand that you also do support the veterans of your community. So, can you please just give us a little bit of overview? What is the current situation of the veterans, maybe in the U.S., as you know, or in your opinion? Why do you feel that the veterans are often left behind after serving our country?
Hmm. Well, I think there's been a real change, right, as our World War I and World War II veterans have aged, become seniors. We've lost many as the years go on. That was a different time in our country, and I think also, um, as veterans have come back from Korea and Vietnam and the wars in the Middle East, we've really seen a shift in what the needs are, and a country that really wasn't prepared to meet all of those needs. So what we find with Vietnam vets, that's a significant portion of our homeless veteran community here and nationally, as well as veterans coming home from the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. We really see a level of trauma, and many people hear about post-traumatic stress disorder. We see that. We see substance abuse. We see the ongoing ravages of war and depression and suicidality that you hear about in national headlines, but when this is a person that's your neighbor, you really want to do something to help.
Of course, of course. Yeah, it's something that we talk about, but I don't think we talk about it enough as much as we should. And they do get left behind. And as you mentioned, many have health or mental health related issues that are not fully addressed. In Santa Cruz County, where your foundation is based, roughly, do you have an idea of how many veterans are in need of support?
Well, certainly in terms of looking at our homeless veteran population, it's doable. It's only about 200 individuals who are experiencing levels of homelessness that require kind of support from the community to step in. And that just feels like an achievable goal. Like we want to eliminate veteran homelessness in our county.
Great. So, in terms of homelessness, what does that look like in Santa Cruz County? How many, is there, I lived in San Francisco and there definitely was a
Mhm.
major, in my opinion, homelessness issue. What about Santa Cruz County? How would you describe the homelessness there?
Yeah, our county has one of the highest per capita homeless rates in the country. This is a place, with hot sand on the beach and temperate weather and a pretty accommodating sort of community vibe. And
Mhm.
we also, I think, most importantly, are one of the most expensive places to live in the world. Um, and specifically one of the least affordable, which is a little different than most expensive. We have skyrocketing rents, home prices that are through the roof, and really not a lot of housing to support people. We haven't developed housing in California and certainly in Santa Cruz County over many generations. And so if a person is already vulnerable because of trauma, PTSD, the experiences of war, substance abuse, mental health, they are so much more likely to fall out of our very fragile housing system that just doesn't have enough. I mean, it's like musical chairs, right? There just aren't enough homes for people here. And so if you're dealing with significant issues to your stability, you're more likely to end up homeless.
Yeah, I can imagine that's a major challenge. So can you give us an idea of then, where do these veterans, where do they live and what are their daily struggles? I don't know if you have any personal antidotes or if you
Mm.
had any personal interactions to know a little bit more about their daily life.
Yeah, I think one of the things that became really clear in the pandemic, but even before, is that veterans really suffer in some of our programs designed to help them because the living conditions can be so tight in a shelter situation. The rules can be so strict that it really isn't a trauma informed way to house somebody. Things are unreliable when they need to be reliable, right? There may be a lot of routines, and routines can really help people to feel safe. But if there are unpredictable people living in very close proximity, that is just not a recipe for success. And so when we sought to work on this issue, we really wanted to provide a place that was peaceful, where veterans could let go of some of that hypervigilance that comes from the traumas that they've endured.
Mhm. I know the foundation doesn't provide direct services to the vets, but you've been part of supporting them in ways that we'll discuss. Until now, or including now, where do the vets normally go for help or basic services? Just food, housing, medical. You mentioned they have it's a difficult struggle for them in Santa Cruz given the prices and costs
Mhm.
of living. Where do they go for basic services?
Really, two kind of main routes to get support. One is a very strong kind of mutual aid system that's developed here with groups like Veterans for Veterans that are really made up of veterans who want to help their fellow veterans. And so that is one place. I think the more traditional roads there would be like our, VFW posts that you see around in most towns in America. And then there are also federal resources and folks who are case managers for veterans to make sure that they are actually accessing, the VA hospitals, transportation, benefits, all of those kinds of things. We have a housing authority that's worked very hard on housing vouchers for veterans. So there is definitely both an informal and a formal system of accessing resources.
That's great. At least they're getting some support.
Mhm.
It sounds like your foundation wanted to support them a little bit more or take an additional step in that direction. So, specifically, could you walk us through how your foundation stepped up to support the veterans in Santa Cruz and maybe a bit about your vet project that you were part of?
Sure. This has been such a pleasure to be a part of. And I feel like one of the great joys of my job is that people come with an idea. And sometimes the idea seems like we could actually get this done. And this is one of these projects that um, I'm just so grateful for the guys who brought it to us and said, "Hey, can you help us?" Because it was their request that we get involved to help them acquire an old lodge in the Santa Cruz Mountains that had served as a tourist destination for decades. Many generations of families went and stayed in these cabins along in the redwoods near a river and enjoyed themselves the summer in the Santa Cruz Mountains. And during the pandemic, the owners of the lodge got really tired. They are older and all the regulations around COVID, needing to do everything themselves, losing workers, they just got really tired and they thought, it's time for us to sell. And at the same time, the state had begun to house homeless people for COVID safety reasons in some motel rooms. And so there were actually two veterans who were living there. And in speaking with those veterans, they had a really different experience living at the lodge than they had living in shelters in the past.
Mhm.
And the main difference was the setting. These are very small cabins that are under the redwoods. They're peaceful, they're quiet, they're tranquil. It's a beautiful place. It's not the hustle bustle of a shelter. It's not fighting for your next plate of food. It's a quiet place of your own. And these couple gentlemen were thriving there. And the more we talked to other veterans, we realized this could truly be a place where people could go to heal, to build community, to contribute back to community. So we got really excited about helping with the acquisition of the lodge.
So you were part of the acquisition of the lodge. They sold the lodge, and if I understand it right, the veterans will be or are or will be living there very very soon. It does seem a little bit risky in terms of acquiring it, transforming it. Sounds like an amazing, and beautiful place. I'm sure the veterans are very keen to want to live there. But it seems a little bit risky also. They don't have, obviously veterans aren't perhaps not working. They don't have the income to support any of the funding aspects. You have tell us why you were so proactive in advocating for this support. Again, you have so many different projects in your community. Why did you feel personally or motivated to tackle this?
You know, I really feel that the Veterans Village is a credible pathway towards a solution towards veteran homelessness, to ending veteran homelessness. And so when there is an action we can take that really gets our community on a path towards a solution, I want to jump in with my whole heart. And on Veterans Day of 2021, we were able to launch a campaign. That's actually the day that we went into contract to buy the Vets Hall was the nonprofit that we worked with. They actually got into contract on Veterans Day to acquire the property. And so we launched a fundraising campaign on Veterans Day. We raised, I think, $600,000 in a couple of weeks. So the community was clearly really excited. And that became an essential part of the financing for the project. But we also needed real financing. So we partnered with our local county bank. We've done several other deals with them before. They provide the bigger loan, and then we provided a $500,000 loan to make the capital more affordable at a lower interest rate. And so the combination of the fundraising and the loan from Santa Cruz County Bank, and then our loan is what's made it possible for the acquisition of the property.
That's amazing. Again, another big feat that you were willing to take on. Um, how does this type of project then tie in with your impact investing program? If you didn't have an impact investing program at your foundation, you think that this could have happened?
No, I don't. This project would not have happened without a loan from the community foundation and without our leadership in raising funds and in bringing other parties together to support the project. So our impact investment program that we do in partnership with community capital advisors has been so essential. I was able to call Mark and say, hey, Mark, this project's happening. What should we be looking at? And he was able to analyze, you mentioned that most of the veterans don't have employment. And so looking at how are we going to pay for this over time through housing vouchers, and really understanding early on that it was going to have to be paid by what's called a project-based housing voucher as opposed to an individual's voucher. And that allows stability for rental income over time. So Mark was able to do that analysis. We were able to look at, what do we need in reserve to deal with a pretty old lodge that's got some funkiness to it? How are we going to make sure that this thing doesn't just fall apart? And then most importantly, how do we expand it? We don't want to just serve 12 guys. We want to maximize the property's use so that more people can have this kind of a setting to live their best lives. So working with Mark on that was really essential, and having the ability to already have a process in place. I would hate for an opportunity to come up like this where we had never done a loan before. It's good that we had a little bit of practice under our belts with other loans so that we could move quickly and get into contract to buy this really special property.
Yeah, I think it's amazing, not only the projects that your foundation takes on and the community that you support, and of course the risk and the challenges, but that you work with other experts and other leaders in the space to really think about how we can be very vigilant, and how we can really put rigor into the numbers and actually think about how we can make it sustainable long term, and as you mentioned, to expand as well. I imagined you had some challenges, some hiccups in launching this project. Obviously, fundraising was one of them. That's amazing that you were able to make an announcement like that on Veterans Day. That was pretty amazing, I imagine. What were some of the key hurdles, barriers, and what was your strategy to overcome them? just as a little bit of inspiration for us today.
Yeah, well, our idea, which is similar with a lot of ideas we have at the foundation, is that where private dollars from local donors, from generous neighbors, can get something started quickly, that's often our role. We can kickstart something quickly with local generous dollars. But then the challenge is, how do we get the public to come in to sustain it? Because the public sector is really responsible for big issues like these, but the public sector can't act quickly enough to do the kinds of things that we do. So I'm always looking for that graceful handoff, where our loan gets repaid, where there's sustained revenue going into the future. And this project was tricky because that handoff, that graceful handoff that we were looking for from the public sector, came in the form of very competitive grants that our governor had released to help combat our huge homelessness problem.
Mhm.
And so these grants were called Project Home Key. They're very, very competitive. We are not, as much as our county has more than its fair share of housing related and specifically homelessness problems, we don't get the attention that San Francisco and Los Angeles do as a small coastal community. So we were very worried about our competitiveness for these grants. And the process was delayed and very cumbersome. And so we were on pins and needles,
Yeah, imagine.
waiting to find out if we got the grant, and then waiting for the award to be signed, and then waiting for the funds to come in. So it has been a long process, and probably not as graceful as we had hoped. Nonetheless, we're so grateful for our county government to getting this application through, and the state for funding it, because now we do have the loans are paid off, and we are able to have financing for a expansion and renovation of the property. So that's great.
That's great. And I know you've mentioned that your community foundation is not the only person involved or the only group involved, and that there's always others that are coming forward and offering their financial and non-financial support. Is there any other groups besides your foundation that you want to highlight that you
Oh
feel
yeah,
critical in rolling out this program? You mentioned,
absolutely.
but
Um,
sure.
Keith and Timiko Collins, as originally as board members and volunteers of the Vets Hall, and then consultants on the fundraising, just did an incredible job of listening to veterans, understanding what the needs are, and designing a program that really works. The Free Guide is another veteran support organization that has just done a great job of fundraising and supporting veterans, providing some case management. The Vets Hall itself is a nonprofit that we worked with that actually purchased the property, and their leadership, mostly from their members and their director, has just been extraordinary. Stony Brook, had this vision. He's a veteran, and he had this vision of housing veterans in some kind of a village for a long time, and that vision really carried us through. And then finally, my financing partner in crime, Doug Fisher at Santa Cruz County Bank, really believed in this project from the outset, has put in countless volunteer hours. He's just been a pleasure to work with in getting this financing together. And then we had a really great county supervisor dedicated to housing issues in our county, Manu Koenig. And even though this isn't even in his district, he really took this project on and made sure to get us through all the cranks of bureaucracy to get us to where we are today. So all of these things take so many people coming together. Oh, and I should add the Housing Authority, which made sure that we could get project-based housing vouchers for the sustainability into the future. So the Veterans Village took a village, absolutely.
Yeah, I can imagine there's a lot of people involved that were helping and to make this happen. So that's amazing that all of your community really came together and felt the same that you felt and wanted to take this on. For the veterans, I'm sure they're also very pleased. What does a normal day now look like for them as compared to before? How has their situation or lives changed as a result of this project?
Mm-hmm. Well, the property is being renovated, so only I think 6 veterans are there right now. This is still only a 1-year-old project, so still very new. And as I said, the financing really just came together. But imagine that there is a place to both contribute, so veterans get to help renovate the place, and I think that really creates a greater sense of community and a place to call home. It's quiet, so you can read, you can go for a hike, you can cook your own food. You're not reliant on a big congregate meal. So it's also right on a bus line, and so access to services is quite easy. And yeah, just community developing.
That's great. So you already touched on the financing aspect of the veterans receiving project support. Um, how do you, or if you maybe could add anything else in terms of how you feel this will be financially sustainable? You want to sustain the veterans and also grow. How do you envision that this is going to happen in the mid to long term in the future?
Well, it's really two major public sources. One is this Project Home Key grant, which allows for the construction and renovation. And then the other is this project-based housing voucher, which allows for the ongoing rental income.
Okay. And then you can kind of visualize this community. How do you envision this to expand? Will there be more housing units, or will there be also housing units but other support services? You already mentioned that they have other needs besides just the physical housing units. So, what kind of support do you envision being offered or being served to the communities there?
Yeah, veterans receive case management services. This is permanent supportive housing. So they are connected to resources. They have a case manager on site looking out for them. So that this is a supportive environment. It's not a good luck, best of luck to you environment. It is a supportive environment.
Sounds like a very holistic community for them as well, where they have other people supporting them, just like your community foundation has other people supporting the work that you do. I see a lot of people holding hands around.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, how can the rest of us then get involved in supporting the veterans of Santa Cruz County? Or do you have any other ideas for how we can support local veteran communities in our own community? It seems like it's a very US and even global issue. Do you have any insights or tips that you would like to offer for how we can get involved?
I think the real important thing is to listen to veterans about what isn't working with current housing options. Because when we learned that there was a level of truly tranquility that was needed, that was a little different than what was being offered elsewhere, we really knew that this property was going to be special. And so I think listening to veterans about what the needs are, what would make housing a success, and why it's been so hard to come by, really that deeper understanding really led us to this terrific solution.
That's great. Thank you again. That
Yeah, thank you,
was
Kim.
our interview, but it's been such a pleasure to talk with you, to learn more about your veterans projects and the other projects that your community foundation is part of. I hope that all of us can take some insights and take some action as well in our own communities, or to reach out to Santa Cruz County and perhaps participate and support the efforts that you're leading. So thank you again for your
Thank
time.
you,
It's been
Kim.
a
Appreciate
pleasure
your time. Yeah, thank you.
to best wishes to you.